Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Tonight, we step into a darker corner of the unexplained, where the line between known wildlife, human threat, and something wholly unclassified begins to collapse. There are not simple campfire stories about things moving in the woods. These are firsthand accounts of encounters with aggressive, intelligent, and deeply unsettling predators that did not behave like any ordinary animal. And in several cases, they didn't seem to fit any accepted category at all. Across forests, deserts, quarries, swamps, mountain roads, and remote lakes, witnesses describe being stalked, charged, watched, struck, or nearly taken by entities that seem to operate just outside the limits of explanation. Some are hairy, some are reptilian, some are avian. Some may have been flesh and blood. Others may have been something stranger, something that crossed into the witness's reality, only long enough to leave fear, confusion, and permanent mark on the memory. Tonight, we examine those moments one case at a time and ask a simple question. What exactly is hunting at the edge of man's awareness? So we begin in one of the most imposing wilderness environments in the United States, where isolation itself becomes part of the threat. What started as a remote camping trip in the Sequoia National Forest quickly transformed into a night of violent sounds, unseen movement, and a vocalization so powerful that it physically shook the witnesses. By morning, the evidence left behind only deepened the mystery and forced a skeptic to reconsider everything he thought he knew. So the witness states, in July 2017, we were camping in Sequoia National Forest, California, and our campground was about as secluded as it gets. Just to reach it, you had to go on a treacherous one-way dirt road, if you call it that, for over an hour. We arrived in the afternoon to find the campground had only two other inhabitants, the campground host and an older lady with a little dog. We set everything up, cooked dinner, and settled in for some rest as the sun went down. Throughout the night, we would be awakened here and there by sounds, nothing out of the ordinary for camping in the middle of the dense woods, just things like branches snapping and things moving in the trees. So around 11 p.m., we heard something going through the bolted trash cans around the campground. There were no bear bins there. Knowing we were in bear country, I beat my car a few times to try to scare whatever curious creature was digging in there. This happened a few times. Whatever it was kept coming back, and as the night went on, things got more and more strange. A meadow about 100 yards from where our tent was, which was populated by a few cattle earlier that day, was some kind of scene for something terrible going down. We heard the sounds of cows screaming, bloody murder like they were being torn apart. My initial thought was it's a bear, cougar, pack of coyotes, some kind of predator was attacking these cows. It was obvious they were in great distress. But after that, there was a noise that I heard that I never heard any animal make. It was loud, deep, howling sound, almost like a portamento, where it starts off low and rises higher and higher in pitch. It was so loud that I could even feel it vibrating in my chest. Needless to say, we were all pretty freaked out. Now, it didn't stop there. Along with the sounds of dying cows, we also heard things like massive branches being torn off of trees around us, something knocking against trees like a rock or with a stick, and at one point, something big walking around our camp. When we stuck a flashlight to the tent window, something massive ran by, shaking the ground as it went by, and it was fast. Eventually, all this commotion died down, but not before that howl or shriek let out again, this time further down into the woods. Now, of course, I didn't sleep at all that night. I anxiously waited for the sun to rise before I inspected the campground. Even though we heard trash being ripped and bottles clanking together, the trash cans weren't knocked over and were still chained shut, which we found odd because a bear surely would have made a bigger mess. We searched for bear, cougar tracks, and the only tracks we found were human looking, like bare feet, maybe a little bigger than normal size, not like those huge Bigfoot tracks people have cast of. I will say I'm far from a conspiracy theorist. I'm a huge skeptic. The thought of Bigfoot I have always laughed off and made fun of, but this was kind of freaking me out. Now, the older lady who was in the campground next to us, well, she booked out of there early that morning, leaving in a hurry. And as the day went on, the prospect of spending another night there, now being the only campers present, became less and less appealing. So we packed up quickly before the sun got too low and headed out, less skeptical now than I used to be. So this next account moves to central New Mexico, where two experienced hikers encountered something compact, muscular, and openly hostile in the brush. The witness knew the local wildlife well enough to rule out the obvious suspects almost immediately. Yet, what emerged from the vegetation was unlike any recognized predator in the region. Now, what makes this case even more disturbing is how closely it echoes an earlier attack nearby those authorities themselves could not confidently explain. Now, the witness and his friend were hiking in the canyon area, Sequoia National Forest, around 11:30 a.m. Both were very familiar with the terrain and wildlife and had spent years hiking the region. Bear advisories had been posted recently, and the mountain lions were known to inhabit the area. The witness had previously encountered a black bear in that same forest. Now, while resting on the trail, the witness noticed movement in the thick brush to his right. The motion was too low and too compact to be a bear, which immediately raised concern that it might be a mountain lion. Now, moments later, a dark gray fur covered creature burst into the vegetation, snarling and growling. The animal was stocky, powerfully built, and much larger than any wolverine the witnesses have ever seen. He estimated it weighed more than 100 pounds and stood higher than a typical wolverine, with a broad chest and thick limbs. Its mouth was open wide, displaying long, jagged teeth unlike those of a cougar. The creature held its ground, facing the men in a threatening position. Now, fearing a charge, the witness picked up a rock while the two men stood frozen. For approximately 30 seconds, the creature maintained eye contact, snarling as if it weighing its next move. Then, without warning, it pivoted, sprinted back into the brush, moving rapidly, and disappeared. The men immediately retreated to their truck and left the area. Now, later, the witness spoke with a neighbor who worked at the Albuquerque Biopark and regularly hiked across the Southwest. The neighbor suggested the animal might have been a small bear, but the witness was certain it wasn't. Its posture, movement, and facial structure did not resemble a bear, mountain lion, or any known species. Now, while searching for answers, the witness found reports of unusually large wolverine sightings in parts of New Mexico, though most were recorded further north. More disturbing was a separate documented incident from Sandia Mountains in 2008, not far from this region. Now, in that case, a 5-year-old boy was attacked while hiking with his family near Balsam Glade on Sandia Peak. The animal dragged the child down a hillside before being chased off by the father. Now, authorities initially claimed it was a mountain lion, but tracking dogs found no cougar scent in the area. And game and fish officials later admitted they did not know what species was responsible. Now, the father had described the attacker as short and stocky with dark brown fur, which does not match the slender profile of a mountain lion. The boy suffered puncture wounds to his head, neck, and back and was hospitalized in critical condition. Both incidents occurred in forested mountain terrain in central New Mexico and involved a compact, heavy-built, dark-furred creature or predator that left no identifiable tracks or scent. Now, I've been checking into this case a couple times over the years, and they're still seeing this thing. I don't know what it is, but from what I'm hearing, it's not a wolverine. It's something that they haven't seen before or just can't recognize. So I don't know what it is. So it is what it is. You determine yourself what they saw. Now, from the forested terrain, we shift to the Mojave Desert, where a hunter and his dog came face to face with a creature that seemed to combine the proportions of a bird with the predatory features of something far more dangerous. Its size, silence, and leaping ability and apparent immunity to close-range birdshot elevated this encounter into truly anomalous territory. Now, what the witness saw perched on that stop sign was no known desert animal, and whatever it was, it seemed entirely unfazed by human force. So the witness stated, my encounter was on October 22nd, 2005 on a stretch of back road in the Mojave Desert in the vicinity of Joshua Tree in Yucca Valley, California. It was the third day or so of quail season, and I was all tagged up and ready to go hunting. I had a little Jack Russell Terrier named Gus that a friend let me borrow for the day since I can't own dogs or cats. I drove out and parked my Jeep at a dirt road intersection on a turnout. There are a zillion dirt roads out there, and some of the bigger ones have stop signs at the intersections. It was a good day. It was getting a little late, but I still hadn't hit my bag limit yet. So I decided to stay out a bit past sundown to try to bag the last few birds on my permit. Now, I was dressed pretty warmly, and Gus didn't seem to mind, so away we went. And by the time I hit my bag limit, the sun had been over the horizon for about an hour. So getting back to the road was easy enough, and following it back to the Jeep was as well. Now, around the time full twilight set in, I came to an intersection with stop signs in both directions and was getting my bearings when Gus froze mid-stride and immediately started growling with his hackles up. He was a chill dog, so watching him go from happy little derp to DEFCON 1 so fast was alarming on his own. I scanned the area to see what he might be upset about, because my first guess was a javelina, a wild pig. and all I had was a shotgun loaded with bird rounds. Now, as I said, there were dirt roads. Each road is roughly the same width as an average two-lane city street. And on the corner opposite the one we were on, I spotted a creature moving with the same general gait as a rooster, but without bobbing its head. Now, what initially clued me in was that it wasn't a chicken. It was a simple fact that from head to foot, it could have been close to 3 foot tall. And based on the body mass, I'd estimate it weighed about 40 to 50 pounds. I tied Gus's leash to my belt so he wouldn't bolt after it and waited for it to wander off. It loitered at the corner for a minute, then, without making much of a flutter, it made a roughly 9-foot leap, 9-foot standing leap from the ground to the perch atop the stop sign. Definitely not a chicken. Now, at this point, I decided it was prudent to be armed, so I popped 2 fresh shells in my shotgun and held it at a ready. Now, when I looked back, I saw its eyes. The 2 things that immediately sprang to mind, and this is where the biology geek comes in, were that, one, they were forward-facing, meaning the animal was likely a predator, and 2, they were proportionally enormous, meaning it was likely full nocturnal. Now, I realized that a 3-foot-tall predatory nocturnal 40-pound animal that can make a 9-foot standing leap was now regarding me from a high perch, albeit roughly 40 foot away. And that was a bad position. I leveled my shotgun and loaded both barrels into it. And after the echoes died down, it was still perched at the top of the stop sign, but making odd chirp sounds that sounded like a lot like sneezing. I was reloading when it jumped down from the stop sign and ran away from us through the brush in the adjacent corner. I finished reloading, waiting until Gus calmed down and jogged back to the Jeep. Now, on the way back, though, I hit my taillights at the intersection where this had happened and saw that the stop sign was definitely being peppered well with shot and that the majority of it had been centered on the animal. Now, this animal had taken a 9-foot standing leap soundlessly, perched perfectly on a 2-inch square area, standing, taking 2 12-gauge rounds as birdshot center mass, and it sneezed at me. Now, on the way out of town, I told the story to a Spanish-speaking clerk at a local gas station who laughed and told his co-worker, "You hear that? This Guerrero just ran into an El Chupacabra." So I don't know what he ran into. But before we continue, if you're enjoying tonight's presentation and want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Phantoms of Monsters Radio. It really helps us to reach more people who are searching for answers about the unexplained. And make sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our live shows. So the next case takes us back to Illinois, where a couple fishing at dusk encountered a roaring, fast-moving creature with oversized glowing eyes and a terrifying presence. The witness described the sound and appearance unlike anything expected in that environment, but the strangest did not end there. When he returned the following evening, the event escalated from a predator encounter into something that crossed directly into the realm of high strangeness and possibly craft activity. So the witness states, "My girlfriend and I were fishing at a stone quarry in Sugar Grove, Illinois on May 5th, 1988. It was pretty much surrounded by cornfields and some small patches of a light forest and shrubbery. The sun had just set, and we were behind stone walls inside the small quarry, so it was getting darker a little faster. Now, on one side of the quarry, the stone wall is elevated 40 foot, and that is the side we face while fishing. And while the area behind us slowly rose to a cornfield edged by shrubbery and small trees, the edge of the trees and shrubbery were about 15 to 20 yards behind us. So we were sitting at the edge of the water contemplating packing up when all of a sudden we heard this very loud roar. And I mean loud. It made us both jump instantly. It roared or howled again. I could see the outline of a creature with a large head and large eyes. Now, I grabbed my flashlight with a large head and large eyes. I could see the outline of the creature with the large head and the large eyes. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it at the creature. It was very large, greenish orange oval eyes. It roared again, and you could see very large predator-like teeth. Then it moved through the trees and shrubs so fast we couldn't see it until it reached the next designation. Then it roared again. It had a roar like anything that lives on this planet, especially in Illinois. I can still mimic that sound that it made. It was very scary. The creature was at its closest at 10 yards and at the furthest about 50 yards. The eyes reminded me of a large reptile. So the next day I went back with my friend to see if I could spot anything or any signs. I could not see anything such as tracks of broken limbs, nothing. Now my buddy and I started fishing. We were there for about an hour when it started to get dark again. We packed up and started to walk up the short path to my Jeep when we both stopped on our tracks. Coming across the cornfield at treetop level was a craft. It had several lights on it, and a large one shone on us for a few seconds. Then it made a 45-degree turn and exited the atmosphere in a blink of an eye. Now, the craft we saw did not make a sound. We were pretty much surrounded by the stone quarry. We could hear a pin drop on the other side, but this craft did not make a sound. So was that related to the creature? Who knows? But I would believe it would have been somehow. Now, we returned to Sequoia again for another account, this one from a former park ranger whose life was permanently altered by what he says attacked him on duty. Unlike a fleeting sighting from a distance, this was a close quarters encounter involving physical impact, direct pursuit, and an overwhelming sense of ambush. Now, if his testimony is accurate, then whatever was charged in that charged that Jeep was not simply observing humans in the wild. It was aggressive, territorial, and shockingly fast. Now, Arthur, a California native, worked as a ranger at Sequoia National Park from 1994 to 1997. Now, he states the incident occurred in his final years of employment and ultimately led to his termination. He recalls being dispatched to investigate reports of loud vocalizations in a dense vegetated area of the park that was rarely visited due to the thick underbrush and the risk of becoming disoriented. Visitors described the sounds as alarming, possibly indicating a bear moving through the area. It was approximately noon. Arthur was patrolling in the park-issued Jeep and carried a tranquilizer rifle as a precaution in case wildlife intervention became necessary. Now, after driving in the area for roughly an hour without observing anything unusual, he stopped the vehicle and stepped out, leaving the driver's door open. He was preparing to contact fellow rangers on the radio when he heard a deep, aggressive growl to his left. He turned and immediately observed what he described as a massive reddish-brown figure standing several yards away. Now, according to Arthur, the creature had wide shoulders, disproportionately long arms, and hands that appeared distinctly human in structure but much larger. He states that it stood taller than any grizzly bear he had seen and possessed a forward-facing face with what he describes as predatory expression. He reports experiencing immediate paralysis from fear. He felt exposed and vulnerable as though he had been ambushed. Without warning, the creature charged. Arthur states that he reacted instinctively, diving back into the Jeep as the entity collided with the open door. The impact shattered the window. He recalls hearing a grunt, which he interpreted as pain from striking the vehicle's frame. He started the engine and accelerated rapidly down the park road. Glancing into his side mirror, he states that he saw the creature pursuing the Jeep on all fours at a speed he considered impossible for a human being. He describes the movement as chimp-like, but far larger and more powerful. After navigating several sharp turns at high speed, he lost visual contact. Upon returning to the ranger station, he reports that no one was present at that time. He states that he was in such a heightened state of panic that he locked himself inside a restroom and believes he lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, it was approximately 9 p.m. and the other rangers had begun searching for him. He was immediately questioned about the damage to the Jeep. When he explained that a large unknown animal had attacked him, he stated to his supervisor that his supervisor accused him of fabricating a story to cover up reckless driving. Now, he was terminated shortly afterwards. Arthur reports undergoing years of therapy without relief. He maintains that what he encountered was not a bear. He emphasizes that bears do not have human-like hands, broad shoulders, and the ability to run as he observed. And more than 2 decades later, he states that this is the first time he has publicly shared his account. So that's that's almost 3 decades. This is an older story. Was it a Bigfoot? I think it probably was, though we don't hear many stories coming out of park rangers and national parks. Now, at times, an unknown predator turns out to be something altogether different than what we first believed. And this next report is an example why investigators must remain careful with assumptions. A cyclist in Oklahoma was pelted with rocks and pursued at night by what he believed was a large, hairy humanoid on a ridge above him. But the follow-up revelation adds a chilling human dimension, reminding us that the wilderness can conceal not only monsters of folklore, but also dangerous minds operating far outside normal reality. Now, the experiencer had been living in Sulphur at the time and frequently rode his mountain bike through the trails of Chickasaw National Recreation Area. He was intimately familiar with the terrain, having walked nearly every trail and ridden almost every road in the park. So one evening, he pushed further than usual and found himself riding back from Buffalo Springs after nightfall. The only illumination came from a bright full moon. He was nearing the stone bridge that crossed the creek just a few hundred yards away when he suddenly felt a sharp impact on his left thigh. He stopped immediately and scanned the area. Moments later, he heard something strike the ground in front of him. A rock roughly the size of a baseball rolled across the trail. And as he lifted his gaze toward the hillside, another rock hurtled downward, striking his front wheel and nearly knocking him off his bike. Now, as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw a very tall, dark figure at the top of the ridge. The shape appeared human-like, but covered in hair. The figure was screaming and aggressively throwing rocks down at him. Panicked, he shouted that he had a cell phone and was calling the police, even though he did not actually have one. The threat escalated that situation. The figure began charging down the hill toward him. He fled immediately, pedaling hard toward the stone bridge. And as he crossed it, he heard a large splash behind him. A heavy rock had been thrown into the creek and he made it home safely, but was very shaken. Now, the next morning, he reported the incident to a park ranger he knew personally. The ranger responded skeptically and jokingly asked whether he had been attacked by Bigfoot. The witness maintained that something had clearly tried to harm him. Now, about a week later, the ranger approached him during a daytime ride and asked him to get into his vehicle. They drove to the local police department. Before entering, the ranger apologized and admitted he had not believed his story. The previous night, a couple had been attacked in the same area. They described a large hairy creature throwing rocks and sticks while screaming. Police and rangers responded, and when they climbed the hill, they too were bombarded by rocks. Officers ultimately subdued a man described as 6 foot tall, naked, covered in mud, with long hair and a large beard. He had escaped from a nearby veterans facility across Veterans Lake. And according to authorities, he was experiencing combat-related delusions and believed he was back in Vietnam attempting to eliminate an enemy. The ranger told the witness he was fortunate the man had likely intended serious harm. The individual was transferred to a more secure facility, and to this day, the witness reports feeling uneasy when hiking that trail and always keeps his eyes fixed on the ridgeline. So now we move into Navajo territory where the meaning of an encounter cannot be separated from tradition, warning signs, and spiritual interpretation. A series of omens preceded a violent roadside collision with something massive and black, followed by eerie laughter in the darkness and complete absence of physical evidence. In this case, the event was not understood merely as an attack, but as part of a larger supernatural confrontation involving witchcraft, pursuit, and intervention. So the witness states, this happened 15 years ago when I was 17 years old. I was with my sister, her husband's sister, and two cousins who were brothers. We were driving back from Cortez going through the mountains near Steamboat, Arizona. It was late at night, and all we could see ahead of us was darkness and tall trees. We were in a medium-sized white pickup truck. I was sitting in the front with my sister and her husband, while the others were sitting in the truck bed. All of a sudden, a coyote ran in front of us. We started to say a prayer. This was bad luck. We continued driving for I don't know how long when three more separate coyotes crossed in front of us. We were starting to become frightened. Then, right after the last coyote crossed, we started seeing owls. Owls are very bad luck because this means that someone in your family will get hurt badly. It's a Navajo thing. Well, we saw 6 owls altogether. The weird thing about it was that there were 6 of us. The night grew darker and longer, but we were near home. We pulled over for some reason, so I jumped in the back and one of my cousins got up front. And not long after that, we were like 5 minutes away from the house on a dirt road. We could see the house and we were going about 30 miles an hour when all of a sudden something big and black jumped in front of us. We hit that thing so hard that the front of the truck crumpled up from side to side. When we had realized what had happened, we got out of the truck to look around. That was weird. And what was weird was this thing jumped out in front of us, the right side of us, but there was a big fence blocking the whole side of the road. Now, we checked the front of the truck. We looked around, but found no evidence that we had hit anything other than the truck's damage. We tried to get the truck started, but it wouldn't turn over. And only one headlight was working, so we shone the light out there to see what we had hit. We couldn't find anything, no footprints or blood drops anywhere. From a distance, we started hearing 2 people laughing and whistling, running around us and hiding in the shadows. We knew that these were witch people, and we just started praying in Navajo. 15 minutes went by, and they were still laughing, an evil, scary laugh. And one of the cousins decided to run back to the house and get help, since we weren't that far away. While we waited, we noticed that we could only hear one person around us. We were scared and didn't know what would happen. Then in the distance, we saw a truck lights turn on and head toward us. We were so happy. The cousin who ran to get help told us that he was being followed while heading towards the house. He said he could hear the person running in the shadows near him. He also said that when he was running by an empty water tank, he could hear its laughter echoing off the tank. When he got back to the house, we called the police. And when the police officer arrived, we told him what had happened. And he told us to take him to the scene. The truck was still parked there with one headlight on. He used his flashlight to look around for whatever it was we hit, but he couldn't find anything. No footprints, walking off. And I mean, we hit this thing so hard that it should have died, but we just couldn't find it. And while we were telling the police officer what had happened, we got a strong sense that he didn't want to be there. Well, we didn't either. So the following day, we called a medicine man to perform a prayer ritual. Now, while we were in the Hogan, he was reciting his prayer. He was using his crystal to see what had happened the night before. He told us that he saw all 6 of us lying around the truck, dead and disfigured. He said the thing was an ancestor's spirit that saved us from a certain death at the hands of the witches. And when we stopped the truck, we interrupted their ceremony and angered them. That they shapeshifted and chased the truck on our way home. The spirit caught up with the skinwalkers and stopped their intended attack. I will never forget that night. So was it a skinwalker? Was it an attack of the witch people? Hard tell. So our next report comes from Saskatchewan, where a family vacation near a remote lake turned into a nightmare after a child was reportedly grabbed by a towering reptilian entity. Now, the children's descriptions were immediate, specific, and emotionally consistent, while the physical traces left at the scene proved frustratingly inconclusive. Whether one interprets this as a cryptid, a folkloric being, or something else entirely, the core of the case remains the same. A young girl was nearly taken by something her family insists was not human. So the witness states, our encounter took place in 1988 while we were on our holidays. We had been planning a vacation to Disneyland for the kids because we hadn't been there for a few years since we had gone anywhere. So we thought the heck with it, and normal life happens and plans fall through. So we mentioned to our friends, and they offered to go to their cottage near Meadow Lake in Saskatchewan. So the cottage that we were staying in was on a smaller lake, but the area of Meadow Lake, although I'm sorry to say that none of us can remember the name of the small lake we went to, but it doesn't really matter anyway. And at the time, our twin sons, Levi and Bentley, were 13, and our daughter, Megan, was 7. Now, the 3 kids decided to go down to the lake while Dad and I were finishing the dinner dishes. They had been gone for about 45 minutes, and as soon as we finished the dishes, we planned to walk down to play in the water with the kids. All of a sudden, we heard screaming, and we looked out the window. It was our son, Levi. So we ran outside to meet him, and he was terribly out of breath. He said a big, giant lizard man tried to take Megan while he and Bentley were in the water playing. Levi said that Bentley screamed at him to go get Mom and Dad while he went after the lizard man. So, of course, we took off in that direction. But by the time we got there, Bentley and Megan were already running back toward the cabin. We gathered up all the kids and went into the cabin. We all sat around the table and we waited for their stories to come out. Megan first said that she was playing in the sand when something sharp scratched her back, and then she felt herself being pulled backward. Then she screamed, and Bentley started coming to help her. We looked at Bentley, and he said, I ran up to it, and I just screamed. Let her go, Bentley said. I was surprised because it actually stopped and was looking down at me. It definitely had lizard eyes and had a long snout with very sharp teeth, and had scales all over its body and a long tail like an iguana has. Now, Bentley said the weird thing was that it was looking at him like it was confused. It was turning its head this way and that way, like it was trying to understand what I was saying to it, and it just let her go and walk back into the woods. So we decided to call the police and report it out of fear that it might go after another kid. So about 15 minutes later, the police pulled in. We explained what happened, and they looked at us like they had a hard time believing us. They went down to the beach and checked everything out. They said that there were scruff marks, but they couldn't make out any prints. Then they said it was probably someone in a costume just trying to freak the kids out. Now, afterward, Bentley said, "Mom, there's no way that was a man in a costume." Bentley said this thing towered over him, totally looking down at him. My husband at the time was 6'2", and Bentley said this thing was about a foot taller than Dad. All these years later, I've mentioned it to a few people, and I'm being told that the whole area has many indigenous people, and it was possible that it could have been a skinwalker. Well, I've never heard of such a thing until I Googled it. I feel like I'm more confused now than I was originally. So who knows what it was? Now, as we close tonight's case files with one of the most unnerving reports in the collection because it combines wilderness intrusion, apparent territorial behavior, and a second encounter that may have followed the witness home. What began as two boys entering a strange swamp area marked by snapped trees and an overwhelming fear response culminated later in an apparent physical grab by a cloaked or shimmering entity seen by a second witness. This is kind of the account that forces us to consider whether some of the unknown predators that are not simply hidden creatures, but entities capable of concealment, pursuit, and deliberate psychological intimidation. So the witness states, I grew up in western New York near Rochester, not far from the Canadian border. My dad built a mini mansion that backed up to the Forever Wildwoods. That's the New York State program that keeps the wilderness as it is. Once the house was built, the woods became a playhouse for me and my closest friend, DJ. It's in the early 1990s, and we loved being outside. Now, one day while exploring, we found an amazing section, a 50-minute walk into the woods that was a gorgeous swamp full of flowers and life. I remember approaching it. There were snapped trees all around, and the straight branches jammed into the ground like spikes. The solid landform a peninsula in the swamp. The trees were almost like walls on each side that funneled us out onto it. We approached the water and saw snapping turtles quickly submerged. Being kids, we started skipping rocks and throwing boulders to get splashes, just doing what kids do. Then, out of nowhere, DJ and I felt a wave of fear, sort of a sixth sense. Our hair stood up and we were both looking around for what triggered the primal feeling. DJ pointed to a tree across the water, and I can only describe it as if the top half was bending back and forth. Not like the wind was gently pushing it, but like it was close to snapping. Left, then right, back and forth. It was bending, creaking loudly, over and over, quicker and quicker. The bottom of the tree barely moved. Then out of nowhere, there was this rumbling growl that was so loud it shook our insides. Now, I've been around loud things before and even learned to shoot an 8-gauge black powdered shotgun. No sound compared to the force of this. Picture our soul getting pushed out of our back and then springing back inside like a giant invisible rubber band. In the pierced silence of this, we both ran for our effing lives. The whole way home, we ran through brushes and branches, ripping up our exposed skin. We both thought we could hear pursuit all around us, but said nothing. Once home, we tried sharing what happened with my parents, but they wouldn't listen. We decided to stay inside for the rest of that day. As usual, DJ was spending the night, and we decided to crash in the support, a 25 by 25 foot room with double hung windows on 2 exterior walls, a sliding glass door leading to a 3-story deck, and a French door leading to a formal living room. Dad had worked hard. He went from a garbage man to a business owner, so this house was massive. Anyway, DJ was on the couch while I lay on the floor in front of the TV with my Nintendo. It was summer, so all the double-hung windows were open wide. I stretched out with my arms behind my head, my neck on a couple of pillows, and my fingers interlaced. My hands were sort of folded back to the back of my head while elbows flared out. DJ was out snoring, and I was half asleep watching TV. So as God is my witness, out of nowhere, I felt a massive hand engulf both my hands and part of my wrist and pull me towards the window. I moved a good 2 to 3 feet and lost it. I screamed in terror. It released me, and within a minute, my dad ran in. DJ was silent, just staring at me. I told my dad what happened, so he went to each window and said the screens were all slid down and in place. He said it was just a dream for me to man up and shut up. Well, I shut up and prayed, and he just went back out. I looked at DJ and asked him if he had seen it. He just looked at me and didn't say anything about it. But he ended up calling his parents and getting picked up in the middle of the night. I went upstairs and tried to sleep in my room. So the next day I called DJ's house to see if he wanted to come over. And his mom said he didn't feel good and not to call again until I heard from him. This confused my 12-year-old mind. We never got together again after that. I'd see him occasionally. He was cold to me every time. Eventually, at the end of the summer, I ran into him on the canal path, one of our fishing spots, and decided to question him. His mother wasn't there to act as a buffer. He finally confessed that that night, for some reason, he awoke and saw a predator grab and pull me. He didn't use that specific word. Instead, he described a massive, clear but distorted shimmer thing that reached in and grabbed me. I never knew others who had seen this cloak in invisibility. I now refer to it as a predator. Did it lift the screen up, slide easily enough, and then close it that quickly? Did it somehow pass through the fiberglass mesh? I just don't know. I looked in the morning but saw no tracks, and DJ thought it was a ghost. I didn't put it all together until much later as an adult. I think it followed me home after we trespassed on its turf. It could have hurt us easily at any time, but it didn't. I almost think it was a dark sense of humor, and that it had a dark sense of humor and enjoyed scaring us a little. I never went that far back in the woods after that. So when you listen to these accounts together, a pattern begins to emerge. Not of one creature, but of one category of experiences. In each case, the witness encountered something predatory, threatening, and fundamentally out of place. These entities did not merely surprise people. They confronted them, tested them, pursued them, and in some instances appeared to display intelligence, territoriality, and even an awareness of fear itself. Some of tonight's reports may eventually prove to involve misidentified wildlife, unstable individuals, or environmental distortion under stress. That possibility must also remain on the table, but other cases resist reduction. They include physical details, behavioral anomalies, cooperative evidence, and the lasting witness impact, which keep them firmly within the realm of the unexplained. Now, whether these unknown predators are relic animals, cryptid species, ultra-terrestrial intrusions, folkloric manifestations, or something even more complex, they continue to appear in places where human certainty is weakest. And that may be the most important takeaway from all of this. We still do not fully understand what shares the wild places with us. And perhaps more unsettling, we may not fully understand what can follow us back out of them. So if you experienced anything like this or had an unexplained encounter or sighting, you can send your report to Phantoms and Monsters at phantomsmonsters.com. And as always, thanks for listening. So if you got questions, put them up there and we'll see what we can answer for you. Big crowd tonight. Got 109 in there now. Any questions, folks? Anything you want to ask? Dagnammit, have you heard of a flying cryptid from Thailand called Chang Nam? It's a rat-sized aquatic elephant with venomous tusk. Well, that's a new one to me. I haven't heard that before. I don't know what to say about that, but no, I haven't heard of that one. If you got any examples that you can send me, send it to me. Anything else, folks? Jose Sanchez, was that last cloak thing you mentioned came through the wall or windows, demoleculed itself to get in? Well, I mean, it sounded like what we have been reporting and written about recently with the Glimmer Man thing, or the Predator type being, the Shimmering Man, or whatever you want to call them. I think, just like with many abduction cases, people have discussed over time that they, they have literally been able to go through solid craft walls or into other rooms with some type of molecular displacement. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't know exactly what's going on, but apparently it may be true. Now, are these glimmering beings, these glimmerman beings, do they have the same abilities, or are these extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, or whatever? You very rarely hear about these things attacking anybody or trying to physically encounter anybody that, or any witnesses. So that was kind of unusual. George Penguin. Have there been any predator-like encounters reported in North Carolina? It could have been. I don't know offhand. The book may have a few in there. I don't know. But I know recently I haven't received any. So yeah, I'm not sure. Or possibly skinwalker encounters in North Carolina. I don't get skinwalker encounter reports in the eastern part of the United States. Now, I don't know if, even though I am part Cherokee, I don't know if there's any tradition as far as those type of beings, but it seems like every tribe or every First Nations people have some type of being that could possibly have anything to do with magic, or, witches or curses and such. I don't know. But I can't recall any, and I honestly don't even know how to even answer that for you. Ali Staring. My question, Lon, is not about tonight's topic, but a question. It is. It's true that Pittsburgh has its own exorcist because there are so many possessions. I don't know. I mean, that exorcism, well, I know as time has gone on that the Catholic Church has become more and more involved with the Catholic rites and the and training people to be exorcists. Now, I know there are a lot more out there who are trained priests who have gotten into that, or that's what they do now. So, if that's what you're referring to, yeah, it probably is. But as far as people who are doing either deliverances or exorcism or whatever they want to call it, I can't tell you. I don't really know. Jose Sanchez, could the idea of the movie Predator actually been based on shimmering sightings? Yeah, I mean, we had talked about that in the book. I think there is a correlation. I think whoever was part of writing the script, and we know who it was J. Allen Hynek's son, who was actually one of the screenwriters. And apparently he maybe had seen something like this before he had written about it. I don't know. We don't know that, but I believe in a lot of these movie scripts that involve unknown creatures, cryptids, or something may have been part of an encounter that happened at some point and became part of a script. So, pop culture kind of works its way into a lot of this. So that's very possible. It could have been from an encounter. Anything else, folks? Okay, so again, the book is out. It's been out now about 3 weeks, doing well actually, selling very well, getting some very very good feedback on it. For those folks who are members of the channel, next Wednesday night we have a Ask Lon episode coming live. So if you want to join up, it's only $2.99. You can be a part of that. I will answer any of your questions, and we'll discuss anything you want to discuss. So take advantage of that, and you know we can mull it over at that time. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming in tonight, and just say stay aware, stay safe, and as always, keep looking into the unexplained. You have a nice evening, have a great weekend, and see you next week. Good night.